So,
Yes.
Coach, it's great to be with you again. Got so many memories that we share together, and you've always been inspirational for me, and always enjoyed our time together. So here's another opportunity for you and I and John and everyone to sort of hash out some ideas and thoughts. And love your smile, buddy. Love it. Look at that.
It took a couple of months to get it back after the playoffs, but
I bet.
Yeah.
And you know what? Even to this day, and I'm going to have to throw this out there. When I watched the entire finals, I think the matchups with you and Milwaukee would have been much better. By the way, and I'm so sorry you guys weren't there in the finals.
Yeah.
What a great season. Let's not take away from that, right?
Yeah. Thanks. It's I think Phoenix had a great year, and
yeah,
we obviously wish we would have been able to go a little further, but it was an outstanding year. I'm proud of our team, our guys.
From a coaching standpoint, and what do I know, right? I think you did some of the best coaching you've ever done in your life, actually. Maybe it's getting older. You're 50 now or something like that. Are you 50 yet?
No, I'm 49 perpetually.
Are you really?
In perpetuity.
Yeah. Oh, in perpetuity. You signed in. You got in a good program. Yeah, for sure.
I did. I can help you.
Well, Q, I just thought it would be simple and fun and inspiring for you as well as our audience, to present some interesting, thought-provoking concepts. Knowing you as I do over the years, you're a thinker, you're a lifelong learner, you're a voracious reader. You have a lot of ideas about things. So I wanted to keep this talk with you and I on John on the level of ideas. So I'm going to throw out a word, and I know you've heard these words before, and I know their meaning to you, but two things I'd like you to kind of try to respond to. A is the relevancy of that word to your leadership and coaching specifically, how it impacts that. But also, in the second part of that would be, in what way is it relevant to life? I mean, driving down the main drag in your car with your kids in the back, and or going out on a date with your wife, those kind of things. Because I think a lot of the coaches out there, they need to see that sports and life are all together, and I know you make that connection. So how about if I just throw you a word, and the first word that comes up.
Hey, Jerry, before you give me the first word, I think, what you said, just to add a little more like context and relevance too, I think it's one of the really rewarding things about this profession, in that I think it is, it's impossible to separate the personal from the professional. I think it's also one of the things that's rewarding about, athletics. That particularly when you are in the moment coaching a game or in a practice, you're not as conscious of a lot of other things. I think who you are as a human being can show itself, in a more raw way, so that it's an opportunity, for reflection and evaluation and growth, because that growth is usually, you can see it with how you interact and how you do your job. So just to
well, that's a great
highlight what you said.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I knew we'd take off in a jet rather than a prop. And as far as I'm concerned, that's we could stop it right now and we're fine, because all the coaches out there need to know that. A lot of coaches, what they're good at is compartmentalizing their life. Oh, I got to go coach. No, you are coaching. You're coaching right here with your kids, your wife, your friends, your whatever. We're all teachers. Coaching means to teach. And so you're referring to something like that. And the thing I remember most about you is you've got a warrior's heart. You've got a warrior's spirit, but a teacher's heart. And I've always defined you that way. And so that teacher's heart is the way to be in life and in all aspects of life. And so having said that, how about the word connection?
Well,
coaches?
I think it's, when you have a connection with another human being. Let's put it in that context. And I think that's one of the most rewarding, aspects of any of our lives. There are certain relationships that are, given to you in some way, shape, or form. And when, those connections, you have an opportunity to build them, to work on them. I think that's the case, maybe with your kids or with a player that you may not have. And with your children, obviously it's different, but there's a different connection I have with my 4-year-old than I do my 10-year-old. And I have a different connection with my 10-year-old than I did when she was, a 6-year-old. So I think those things are living, breathing, relationships. With respect to coaching, there's some players you have an immediate connection with. And, one of our guys, Jordan Clarkson, for me, the minute we traded for him, it was easy. And it wasn't stagnant either. I think that connection grew. So it's not, kind of a finite, stagnant thing. I think it's an organic thing. And with JC's, like you probably look at me, you could, and Jordan, I think these are, two very different people, based on our kind of personal experiences to a certain point in our life. And the reality is that we have a really, really deep, connection, and it's based on, the real things that maybe aren't as visible. One of the best photographs, actually in the room here, Derek Garduno, they sent me this year. Derek's our head of PR who twisted my arm to get me to talk to you. So he,
thank you, Derek.
We were in Sacramento and I was sitting next to JC, and it was kind of one of those pseudo off days. He came to the gym just to kind of be a part of the group and really have this connection, frankly, with the team, which is important. And we were sitting like one seat away from each other, and he had his sunglasses on, and I was sitting there, and, there was this photograph of the two of us talking. And, in some coaching circles, you may look at that and say, oh, here's a guy, he's having a conversation with the head coach. He's got his sunglasses on. Why does he have his sunglasses on? Is that a form of disrespect, or however we might kind of box that? And the reality was it never even crossed my mind. And because that's JC. And, I knew he was listening. I didn't need to see his eyes, because we have that kind of connection. And I think the lesson for us all on some level is that, let's not be closed to having connections with people that in Jordan's case may appear to be different than you. But really we have so many things in common, and that connection allowed me to coach him in a way that I think brought out, some of his really, really good qualities. He's fearless, and he needed to know that I appreciated that and tried to draw that out of him even more. He takes bad shots, but he makes a lot of them. And, because he's allowed to shoot the ball and encouraged to attack and play with freedom and really express himself on the court, that also allows me to coach him. And I'll tell you a quick story that while we're on JC, we had a film session, and he must have dribbled the ball like, I don't know how many it was, but I counted them, 1, 2, 3. I think it was over 12, because he's a really good isolation player. And, a lot of us, you can hear it on commentators and whatever, you're dribbling the ball too much. Well, that's kind of what he does, and in this case, he was dribbling it too much, because I counted him, and I told him after I counted the 12th dribble, I was like, you don't get any more than 9. And so the next game I was on the bench, and we came to a timeout, and I was like, Jordan, that was 10. And he goes, Coach, backcourt doesn't count. So I think from a coaching standpoint, to the extent those things are instinctive, and then, there's other relationships and other players, you have to work on them. And I think maybe you find out that, similar to maybe the way someone would perceive that photograph, that there's connections that are available to you if you're willing, to look for them.
Yeah, to be open to the possibility that, I can connect with all my athletes. What a concept, instead of looking for people that really fit into your method and your way of being. You're looking out there and you're saying, I can connect with all 12 of these guys or 14 of these guys. But you see, I think the thing that coaches listening to you, coach, need to hear is that, yes, part of it is instinctive and part of that connection is natural too, but you work at it. I know you actually put time and effort into making you. If I know you probably went over to him and sat down right next to him knowing that this would help the connection. You know what I'm saying? You do things to make connection happen is all I'm saying, and that needs to be heard by all of our listeners.
Well, it's again, I think that's the way that you are best able to coach somebody. Those are the relationships in your life that are most rewarding. When you see a friend, we could use the two of us as an example. You may not talk for a period of time, but when those connections exist, and they exist, previously, those are those friends you're talking to them, and like we talked, I think, I'm trying to think, a couple months ago, and you just feel that boom, you pick up where you left off. So, that's from, I think, a shared spirit, and also from sometimes a shared experience. And as far as working on them goes, I've always admired Coach K from the standpoint. I mean, I don't know how many people have played for him, at this point in his career. If you think about it, each year, the players that have come through that program, I always get a birthday card from him, and it's always signed. And I don't care if, he signs it while he's watching TV. The fact of the matter is, not to say that he does, but, he works at that connection, and that takes time, and time is so valuable to all of us. So I think intuitively people understand that. That when you acknowledge the things that are important to them, in this case, just something as simple as a birthday, even if, like we were joking, maybe we don't want to celebrate our birthdays with the same zest that we did, when we turned 18 or 21. I think to work at those things and to figure out what's important to different people. Rudy Gobert, when the U.S. team in the Olympics, when France beat the United States the other day, I knew that was a moment for him that was probably more important than it was to a lot of people on his team and even on the U.S. team that game. And so the opportunity, just something as simple as a text with Rudy to congratulate him and acknowledge that, is something that meant a lot. And that took me probably 12 seconds. And it wasn't something that, that I thought about, the way that I just described it to you. But I think intuitively you can figure those things out if you're around people for a while, and then just being willing, to be self-aware enough and aware enough of, your surroundings and the people you're with to acknowledge those things and to connect.
John, you want to jump in here now for a while. I'm going to let you go.
Quin, and we want to respect your time here as well as you're preparing for the draft. You touched on so many things within connection. I remember a couple of years ago, my wife and I went and saw the Dalai Lama speak, and I know you'd appreciate that. One thing the Dalai Lama said, he's in front of 5,000 people, and he says, I'm up here and I'm the Dalai Lama and I have flowing robes and all this. He goes, we're all 99% the same. And I think this is one of the keys that you just talked about with connection is we can focus on what's different backgrounds, all these different things, or we can say, well, where do we connect? And so I think, two other words that Jerry and I wanted you to sort of comment on are, in order to connect, you need to be authentic and you need to be a little bit vulnerable too, right?
Yeah, there's no question, I think from a coaching standpoint, vulnerability, I think sometimes we feel like it is somehow in conflict with leadership and authority. And in my mind, it's not the case at all. I think that, to be vulnerable, particularly as a leader, and particularly when your job is to oftentimes be critical of the people that play for you, I think it's really important for me, even after a game, where you're willing as a coach to own your mistakes. And too often we have, situations where we're telling someone else about what they did wrong and how they can be better. And there isn't, the way that this thing is set up, oftentimes there isn't opportunities for players to tell you that. And at least in front of the group, sometimes you'll get a player that would come and say, hey, can you consider this, or this would help me, and things like that. But hopefully you're vulnerable enough in front of the group that you open the door. I always get a kick out of, I have an open door policy. Well, your door may look open. There may be a big force field in front of the door that, no one can see. If you think your door is open and no one's ever walking in your door, there's a good chance that, there's a door that isn't a physical door. So with the vulnerability, again, for the coaches out there, there's nothing wrong with after a game. Usually for us, at least particularly in the NBA, it's acknowledgement of a situation. Hey, I could have done a better job to get you, in this situation, or I made a mistake here. And that happens. I'm not saying I look for those opportunities, but when they do come, if I know there's something that's keeping me up at night after the game that I wish I could have done better, there's a good chance that it's something that, I could share with the team. Not always, but, and we had a game against Milwaukee 2 years ago, and we were in the timeout. There's 2 seconds in the game, and Bojan Bogdan, I drew up a play. We actually call it Barca. A lot of our plays are named after EuroLeague teams because I can remember them that way. Our players think we're crazy. But Bojan knew how he was going to be defended, and he said something in the huddle to Mike Conley, and rather than cutting through the baseline, Mike just surfaced to the top of the floor and, basically cleaned out the corner for Bojan, and he popped right to the corner and made the shot. And after the game, I was getting all this praise for running this brilliant out of bounds play, game winning play. And it was great for me to not only tell our team, after the game, I'm glad we have you guys. But I also told the media, because I thought that in that moment, it's true, so sometimes it's something as simple as just being willing to acknowledge the truth, feels vulnerable, particularly in a leadership position. But I think it opens the door for you in those instances to do a lot of other things.
Thanks. Jerry, last word for Quin?
Last word for Quin.
You can give me a couple more. I know we're pressed for time. We may not take our draft pick. We may trade up. So who knows?
I definitely want to hit one of Quin's favorites. Tell me it's not, and that is love, in terms of how it refers to coaching, in terms of how it relates to you and your personal life, and the importance of this in this particular time of our lives all over the world. Love. What does that do for you?
Well, I think it's all encompassing. Some of these other words that, that we talk about, are very difficult. There's strands of that word, and there's a thin red line, of love that runs through vulnerability, that runs through all those things. And to the extent that you can be, it's philosophically a way of life. If you can wake up every day and be loving, there's probably a good chance you're doing a lot of the other things we're talking about. And, I know some other words that we've talked about, something like compassion. It's very difficult to separate. If you're compassionate in a situation or empathetic, you're probably, you've got love in your heart. You talked about being a servant, and having, what do we say, a servant's heart. You talk about being a teacher. Those things all involve, a loving connection. It's almost an adjective that you can add to everything, and then something that clearly, stands alone in and of itself. And, my parents both passed away about a year ago. And, my mom right before my dad, and my mom was the most loving person that I've ever been around. And that was really the reflection that I had about that relationship. And we all have that, with our families. But, a few months later when my dad passed, I didn't really associate that word with my relationship with him as entirely. It was very easy to see that with my mom. Jerry, I think you may have even met my mom at some point in Missouri, but as I was reflecting with my brother on our relationship with our dad, which at times was much more tumultuous, we were laughing about washing the car and how he would always come out and you'd miss a spot and you'd have to do it again, or you didn't vacuum it. Or the one we always remember is, back when they used to have white walls on the tires, you had to scrub the white walls with the SOS pad. And, you could never get the white walls quite wide enough. And it was like, oh, here he goes. But in hindsight, there was a love that was present there. And there were things that he taught us and habits that we were able to form because of his willingness, to correct those things and to essentially coach us. And doing so with love, I think, resonates. I think a lot of those things we talk about are better when they're done with love.
When John Wooden retired, he was asked by reporters, why are you so successful? And they all expected, the pyramid of success to come out and rolling out all these words and stuff. And he said, guys, it's really simple. I had a lot of love in my coaching. And the thing is, I pursued that even further. And I remember him saying something like, you can't just love the good guys. You got to like the bad guys. And by bad, he didn't mean they were bad characters, but they were the tough ones to love. You have people on that bench that are tough to love, but you seem to be able to love them. And how is that? And how can coaches out there love athletes who are really difficult to love? They show up late or something like that, or they don't want to pick up the balls after practice or whatever. What do you think about something like that?
I think you can, too often we think of loving something, in a very general kind of holistic way. And, I think there's a possibility that you can find little things to love about a situation. And sometimes, whether it be a player or, you're sitting in traffic or whatever the case is, the times that we get frustrated about all kinds of different things. And, if you can find a way to find something loving and to look for it, that oftentimes that kind of can have the impact of opening you up to other things. And, one of the most really beautiful things is to be able to love people's faults. And, that's something that's not easy. It's for all of us. I know for me in particular, you can get hung up on being critical of people's faults. And in some level, if you can embrace them, someone that's late all the time, it's like, I try to picture them banging around the house like I do and having to do one more thing and kind of getting some joy out of that. Whereas, punctuality we consider to be a virtue. And it is in many ways. I think, we talk about punctuality as it relates to respect. But at the same time, if you can either take that and think someone's being disrespectful of you, or on some level, maybe you can find something about that situation that can be appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Quin, we want to wrap this up for you. And, we had, just so our listeners are hearing this, we'd given you a list of 9 words and you've wrapped them all into the first 3 there or whatever for. So thank you so much. You've talked about humility. You've talked about compassion. You're such a servant. Maybe if you could just wrap it up with, we have 300 coaches listening. They coach a whole variety of sports, probably in 30 different countries right now. What is the one thing that you would like to leave them with that, for you is, what does coaching mean, and what about your influence and how you can use that the best way you can?
Let me say first that it's one of the things that I think is really a gift that we're given, in this profession. I'll use basketball, specifically. The fact that you mentioned we've got coaches from across the globe. We're connected in that endeavor, and coaching itself connects us in a more specific way. Right now, other than soccer or football, for our international listeners, the sport of basketball, and you can see it right now in the Olympics, clearly when you have all these NBA players playing for different teams, it's a connecting endeavor. And that's a gift that we receive, as coaches with an international game, because there's so many opportunities to learn from each other. And often those things present themselves, in different ways. So, to me, that in and of itself is something that I consider, really, really valuable. And I think the thing that I would say, this, Jerry, you may remember this, Doc. I don't think you were in town when we were back in Missouri, but I ordered a pizza after one of our games, and I got this pizza, and I can't remember what kind of pizza it was.
It was great. It was great pizza. I remember that town.
Pizza.
Great pizza. Yeah.
And when I opened the box, I had a play written. Not that I wrote, but the delivery guy wrote, and it was on the back of the box, and it was a lob play. And I just thought to myself, like, this is wild, this guy. And part of me was like, what is he doing telling me what to do? He's the pizza guy. But you know what? It was a really good play, and we actually ran it. And I don't think we scored on it, but just for sake of the story, let's say we got a dunk. And so I think, to have an open mind, for the opportunity to learn from one another, whether that be, players and coaches. I think I learned so much from players, coaches from other sports, coaches from other countries. If we can use athletics and coaching to learn about ourselves, that's one of the great opportunities we have in this business, because so much of it is about those words that you described, whether it be connectivity or compassion or love, and to have an opportunity to live that, and to we come back to connection, to learn from one another, I think is the gift.
Fantastic. So double check those pizza boxes, coaches, because you never know what you might learn.
The gas station is another good place to get advice.
The gas station.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Jerry, last word before we let Quin go.
I just want to thank you, Quin, not just as a good friend of yours, but together, but as just an amazing, authentic, genuine coach who really cares. And that's another word that I like to throw out there. Cares about learning, cares about helping people. And I know we're honored to have you here, because I know how busy you are right now and how much is going on in your life. And to take this time to give to us is so generosity for sure. And I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you guys, and thanks for what you're doing in these podcasts, and in your writing, and everything that you're giving to all of us. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Quin.